All, and welcome to the Scrutiny Procurement panel. Apologies for absence. I know Councillor Mary Sherwood has phoned me to say that she can't make it.
We've had apologies from Bridget Rowlands as well.
Okay, all right. Disclosures of personal and prejudicial interest. Members first. None? Excellent. Right. Officers? No? Right, okay. Right. Item 3 is the prohibition of whip votes and declarations of party whips. Okay. Item 4 is minutes of the previous meetings. Can I assume that they are correct? Okay. Right, thank you all. Public questions. Are there any public questions?
We've had no public questions.
Excellent. Right. Then we go on to item 6, which is the scrutiny inquiry, procurement, final report. Now, obviously, the Deputy Leader, Councillor David Hopkins, is with us. I don't know if he wants to say anything before we go into this.
Well, no, sorry, thanks, Chair. What I would want to say is I welcome the report at this stage. I know there probably could be some amendments after today's meeting. In principle, at this particular time, obviously, I don't disagree with anything there. In fairness, I think it's a very comprehensive report. It's been a dig deep into the procurement services. And I think what it actually does show is the good work that has taken place, particularly, so I'm quite happy with the report as it is. There's only one question I would have wanted to ask, if that's possible this time, was to just ask a question on the panel's recommendations on number 3, the Cabinet increase the use of natural-based solutions in council procurement practice when it is necessary and more suitable sustainable solutions. Have we got anything particular in mind on that? Because obviously, if there is, and there is something that I could take away and look at that. The rest I thought were, quite self-explanatory. But that was the only one I wanted to see if there is something I could do something rather quickly on.
I think it was more to do, and bear with me if Councillor Peter Jones might come back and say this, but I think this was more to do with us looking at alternative methods of, say, weed control and various other natural phenomena that we could use, if you like, a natural solution to a problem other than chemicals or any other form of intervention. I think I'm right in saying that. I'm right, Peter?
Yes, thank you, Chris. I would agree with what you've just said. That is the kind of thinking behind this. And also, of course, developments such as flood risk management and so on, looking for alternative nature-based solutions to what you might call the more grey or concrete approaches to managing certain problems. So it's not likely to affect procurement on a wide basis, but in certain specific areas, perhaps it will. And we should always, I think what we're saying is, look, if there is the possibility of what we're calling a nature-based solution, then to look at it as an alternative to more mechanical or other forms of solution. I hope that helps, David.
Okay, thanks for the clarity on that. Thanks, Peter. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, right. Chris, you're head of commercial services. Is there anything you'd like to add to this report?
No, again, I found it very interesting, an important process, the work of the panel to explore its understanding, its thoughts on procurement. I think the recommendations are well made and to be considered. I mean, as always with these things, there's the amount of resource, time, effort, complexity to be considered. But in terms of how the report is and what it stands for and where it seeks to drive the council, yeah, I think it's a good report, and I'm more than happy to work with Councillor Hopkins, the Cabinet, to consider how it can be best implemented.
Okay, right then. Now then, is there any members who would like to, and then we'll go through the report page by page. Any other comments? Okay, if we turn to the report, summary and conclusions, I think we all agree, and believe that this was a very challenging subject, and a subject which I think tested our ability to get people together and to understand what the problems and the limitations of what we can do as well. Because, you know, whether we like it or not, we have to cover certain certain rules, and there are certain degrees that we can change. But generally speaking, there is a method by which we got to follow. I think one of the other conclusions that we've come out of this is that there needs to be some form of future discussion. Again, I'm not sure if a panel would be the right way or just a working group to look at how the third sector, because one of the complaints we had, you know, from the third sector was the way in which our contracts were constructed through the procurement process, that many of them were too large. We've actually mentioned that in the report. And I do understand where they're coming from. But again, I think there's an issue about how we actually go about that. And I think that's for further discussion at another time. And also, I think when we look at the long-term challenges, the council's approach to social value, localism, biodiversity, natural environment, etc. Again, it says there a pilot, the current council's pilot programme review this matter. I think we need to emphasise that, because localism, with the way in which things are going nationally and internationally, localism will become even more important when we procure services, and also many of our goods in the future will, because of the cost of travel in the future, I think is going to be critical that we look at procuring a lot more of our services and goods in a very much more localized way. I think the fourth one, the Cabinet Development Mechanism for measuring the impact on spending on policy commitments in relation, example, social benefits, local procurement. That's a difficult one, and I don't know. I a conversation with Chris over this, because I think the idea that internal audit and performance monitoring be part of the process for this. I would like, whilst this report is going ahead, I would like your views on that, Chris, because I think that's one that we have discussed. I know Michelle has sent out a number of questions on this one, and it would be interesting to hear what you have to say about that. Peter, you have your hand up.
Well, yes, I was really in relation to number 2 in the long-term challenges, Chris. The actual interpretation of what it means. I think what we were trying to say is that in terms of contracts, obviously we will look at the carbon footprint of impact on the council, but I think it's also important that we understand that it's the carbon effect of the contractor. I mean, different potential contractors may offer different solutions to a particular procurement issue. And I think what we're trying to say there, and I'm not sure whether it says it sufficiently clearly, I hope that's what we mean, is that we're also looking at the carbon footprint of the potential contractor as well as on the council itself. But others may have a view on that.
Okay, anyone else have a view? Mike?
Yes, Chair. Yeah. The point you picked up, regarding the involvement with our internal as well. Yes, this is something that internal audit committee did pick up a lot within education with schools, where the bulk of the findings of the audit officers when they were going out to schools was that 34% of the problems was around procurement, and that schools really didn't understand the process. And I think it's very, very welcoming now that we've had Brian Rolls to come to us and to get that point across, where we can now look to put measures in place that will, tighten all that up, and hopefully we can get good practice from that, and we can share it with our other departments as well, Chair.
Okay. Anyone else on the long-term challenges? I think it's probably better if we go this way. Right, on the medium-term improvements, the school guide for procurement, which Councillor Mike White has just commented, has anybody got any issues with that? No. So, and then resources to support procurement activity, review and enhance the new UK reform, the public contractual regulations. Any comments? Number 7, the number of open days. This is one which I think I would like, if with the panel's approval, to actually recommend to council to become, or cabinet to become, a quick win, because I think it's more appropriate that we say, look, you know, in the near future we need to have open days where we can explain our procurement exercise, not just to local businesses but third sector as well. I think it's incredibly important, and I hope panel agree with what I just said, that I use that as a quick win. I've got 3 people got their hands up now. Councillor Lyndon Jones, sorry.
Great, thank Chris. Totally agree with that, because it really also helps the council explain the case, how it actually works, and that can't be a bad thing. The more you do that, the more you say it, the more people will understand it, and I think totally agree that should become a quick win.
Okay, Councillor Jeff Jones.
Yeah, I got no problem with it, but sorry, perhaps going back to some of the points as well. I'm not quite sure what resource is required with regard to these open days. I think we need to be aware really that it's going to tie up 1 or probably 2 members of procurement. If they become extremely regular, I think there'd need to be a resource allocation to actually cover this. But in essence, yes, open days are very good. And going back to Peter's point as well with regards to the carbon footprint, really, again, it's resource to actually investigate this and so on. It could be quite a long process and so on. And with Mike's point, with the schools, yes, but if we go back perhaps even 3 or 4 years, that problem was actually within the local authority as well, in other sections where people were not, shall we say, following correct procedures. So, I take my hat off to them in procurement that, shall we say, they've, and finance as well, they managed to actually, shall we say, control that. And yes, the next step really is schools. So, but yes, I agree with more open days with a caveat.
Okay, Councillor Philip Downing.
Yeah, we had quite a discussion on the open days, Chair. I think what came out of it was that local firms, they're either a 1-man band, 2-man band. They weren't coming to the big open days because they couldn't find the time. But the more open days we got, the better chance they have to come along to see how the council work, which is a big bonus, because the way you look at it is, for example, if a small firm who employs 1 or 2 or maybe 3 people, say from Gosainen, get a contract, then that money will be spent locally. And that's what we were looking for, rather than larger firms coming in and bringing their workforce with them, and we don't see a penny of it within Swansea. And I think this is what was behind this, Chair. And yeah, a quick win, I think, is a good way of putting it.
Okay. Before I bring the Deputy Leader in, I'll go back to Councillor Peter Jones.
Very quickly, Chris, just on Jeff's comment about measuring carbon footprint, which I agree isn't an easy thing, particularly in relation to potential contracting firms. But it's just worth reminding ourselves that we as a council have committed ourselves not just to being, as a council, net zero by 2030, but for the whole of Swansea to be net zero by no later than 2050. So encouraging our potential suppliers to go down that road themselves will help towards the overall target for 2050, and hence the importance of it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Peter. Councillor Phil Downing, you still get your hand up. Do you want to come back again?
Sorry, Chair, a bit slow there.
Okay. Okay, Councillor David Hopkins, Deputy Leader.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Holly. What I would say in this, right, that this is, I think Chris Williams will tell you, this has been a drum I've been beating for a long time to actually get out there, get more SMEs on board and work with them. What I would say that we had some plans, or some ambitious plans to do that before COVID. COVID hit us, and obviously that stopped us there. But I will certainly give a commitment on this that we will do as much as we can with local businesses to try to help them grow and understand the workings of the council through open days and every tool that we can actually get on board. We'll get a partnership working with SMEs locally as possible, because I think localism is obviously the way forward. With Brexit, with everything else that have hit us, with all the other challenges, then I do agree SMEs are, local SMEs, hopefully are a way forward. But we need to grow them with us, and I think that is the challenge. How do we grow the 1- and 2-man bands to actually be in a position to do that? So I'll give that commitment. That would certainly help. If you put that as a quick win, I haven't got a problem there.
Okay, can I say one of the issues about growth is not necessarily that you have to make the company bigger. Many of the ways you make the company more efficient, so they do more with less resources. And one of the ways forward is to look at how our recycling and our total recycling policy deals with local companies. And I think one of the things we need to look at is if we are pulling a building down, or we are doing some structural work somewhere, that the materials that we use are recycled. I know they are to some extent, but I think this should actually be part and parcel of any new procurement exercise. And that is why what I would suggest is, when we have the open days, we invite in the recycling section, the recycling sector as well, because I think it's really important that we look at the minimization of resources when we're going forward, because quarrying can't go on forever. That's the basis of all the resource limitations that are going forward. What I'm going to suggest is all the other items in that in that sector is ensuring that council develops and maintains direct links. Cabinet maximises the opportunity to involve service users and citizens, and continue to work the areas of non-compliance in council procurement activity. I think they can stay as they are, but I think it is the one about open days we say should be a quick win. Is that okay?
Yeah.
The other quick wins, I'm not sure, 1 or 2 of them, there's not a problem, I think, with leaving them in there. The only thing I would say is that 13, the working group to create an education procurement, includes representatives in schools. I think that one, maybe we should ask the Scrutiny Programme Board in the future council whether or not how that should be set up with the commercial services, because I'm not sure it should be under an education scrutiny, or it should be under a procurement scrutiny, or it should be under performance. I think, Michelle, that is something we need to put forward at some time in the future.
If you look at, we've got there's 2 parts to that one, actually. If you remember, there was the first part, which was about education, going away and sorting, actually meeting with procurement, etc., in their own right, and sorting out some of the issues there. But we also, I think it's right at the end, actually, we've put a little thing in, haven't we, that's referring to Scrutiny Programme Committee, how procurement fits into our scrutiny work programme, and whether there is scope to discuss the subject and relevant issues on an annual basis, including exploration of issues in relation to the cost in repair and all these other sort of issues. So that would then address those sort of issues. So anything else that is a scrutiny sort of related thing could come under that, really. So that could look at whatever you need it to look at, really, because that would make it a little bit more general. Does that suit? Does that fit?
I think if members agree with that, Councillor Mike White, you're on mute, Mike.
I think what we was trying to tease out of this was for the that the schools, through education, have a policy in place that sort of surrounds procurement and school premises. So then, you know, you would have a you'd have a policy to refer to as a subcommittee of the governing body, so you know that you were following the actual what the policy was asking you to do.
Okay. Does everybody agree with that? Okay. Right.
Sorry, you know, on that.
Sorry, Jeff.
Sorry, I didn't have my hand up and just I couldn't get the click off really. Yeah, you know, I agree with Mike and so on, but there is an agreed process. So, shall we say, I'm not sure if there's a policy with regards to, you know, what schools should follow now. And I think the head signs up to that, doesn't it? You know, and when audit actually go out and, shall we say, uncover that they've not followed that and so on. I'm not sure with regards to what Chris, you know, would actually say here. You know, what sort of action was taken against, shall we say, heads of service when various departments didn't follow, you know, procurement procedures, you know, with regard to orders and so on, or, you know, using the system. So I think it's an element really of investigating, you know, what can be done, you know, penalising, if want of a better word, really, with regards to getting schools to follow what they actually sign up to, or what the, you know, council has laid down.
Councillor Mike White.
For the clarification, I think really what we were trying to sort of tease out was that heads have got delegated powers to an X amount. Okay, they can spend. Then after that, they have to come through the schools governing body, finance committee, and main governing body committee to ratify the spend of the project with what the head wants to do within the school. And I think it was to get that clear understanding that if you had a subcommittee there, knowing that project was going to exceed that amount, at least that committee would see that the proper procedures was being followed.
Yeah, I can see what you're saying, Mike, and I can understand why you're saying it and the way you're saying it. I think the only thing I would say is that one of the things we have to do is educate the governors as well as the head teachers and what have you, because the governors, well, let's be blunt about it, and we always, as governors, we're all governors and we all look for the best value for money we can get, but that's not always evident in some of the quotes we have. So one of the things we need to do is to actually have a training course for governors to explain why we go through a procurement route, because it's not always just cost. It's about you know, it's more about getting value for money and for the school, as opposed to getting the best price all the time. But I think what you're saying is that way, and includes that.
Yes, Chair. What I meant as well, with that subcommittee being there of governors, like, you know, like we're on the governing body together, no, but at least then those governors would know the process, the policy. The head teacher would know it as well, obviously, because, you know, but it would give us also the opportunity to actually challenge the actual procurement and see if it was what was coming forward. What was it, one, going through the proper procedure, and also was it going to provide value for money for the benefits of the pupils and the school. So it would develop in that effect, really.
Okay, right. Anyone else on the wins? Chris, would you like to come back on what you've heard so far?
I think just listening to the schools debate, for me, there are a number of layers to it, which I think people touched on. There's this issue that are the schools following the rules, and in the recommendations, there's a review of a school's guide. So I think the emphasis there was on making sure there's absolute clarity on the rules to be followed, and a refresh of that piece of work. So that, in the way my area works, I could see us supporting the education service to work with schools to create that clarity. Now, there's some other layer here that's, well, a number of other layers. One is around what happens if schools don't follow the rules. And I'm assuming that is the audit committee and its powers and so forth, which would pick such things up. So it's to make sure the interaction between audit and the school's guidance is absolutely clear. But then there's a third strand, which I think people are touching on, which is the training and support for schools. You know, from what I pick up, you have the school head, but you also have a limited amount of administrative function in each of the schools, and that can turn over, if we call it that. There can be a replacement of staff fairly regularly at that level. So it's making sure the appropriate training is in place, that people have access to good training. And again, I could see my area supporting that, being heavily involved in it. So in summary, I'm saying I think that school's focus is a good one for a number of reasons, to keep the focus on it. As people have touched on, schools have delegated budgets. They can be considered separate contracting authorities, so they have the right to enter into their own contracts. So it's important to understand that relationship. I think that it's not that they have to seek my permission, which is what the rest of the council does. When it comes to school, it's the governors, as you rightly pointed out, Councillor Holly. So it's having that mapped out, that we've got that absolute understanding. I think it's that interaction between clarity of the rules and how they should work, audit to come in and check, and then, you know, you could say even before that, this constant education and training, which I think has come across in the discussions, which is really important. And I think if we hit those things, three things combined, that'll be a strong way forward. On other things, that the open days, absolutely agree with that. As Councillor Hopkins said, we have to understand the pandemic has knocked the council somewhat sideways. Even now, I was thinking as we were discussing it, self-isolation of staff. You know, I know we're coming to the end of this, but it's been very much a live issue that, you know, we've got constant issues managing the workforce with regard to the pandemic. But I think what's the value in all this is it's setting us straight on, as you, in your sort of terms of reference, linking it to the recovery plan of the council. Okay, we're coming to the end of the pandemic. What are we going to focus on? And I absolutely agree that open days are a key thing to get back up and running. I think the new, what's become very established technology of Teams is a very useful way of communicating with businesses. But as the report, as your report says, there are a number of ways in which we can expand that. So I'm absolutely 100% in agreement with it. You know, I can't say more than that. It's something we got to focus on. And Councillor Hopkins, as he said, has always been focused on it. But, you know, the last period has been one of saying, well, we'd like to do a lot of stuff, but right now it's frankly managing, you know, the continued operation of the council, whether it was for care homes, whether it was for whatever else. But I think the report sets us on a strong way forward. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Lyndon, Councillor Lyndon Jones.
Great, thanks, Chris. Yeah, on the open days, what I was going to say was maybe we could be looking at open evenings and maybe weekends as well, because that does make it more accessible. And when you've got a small business, they're probably really tied up during the week and very often Saturdays, but evenings would open that up a bit.
Okay. Right, if I go back now, if I go back to the report, I think everybody's gone through the wins, the quick wins and what have you. The next item is why we produced this report, the overview, select the topics, intended contributions. Can I, at this stage, thank everybody that's taken part in our investigations. And we've been very fortunate. We had a number of private sector companies that came forward in that roundtable discussion. And I know we all found it quite interesting, especially when we heard the guy from Ford's praising us. That was somewhat strange to hear a private company praising the council, but there we are. It happened. But I think also when the third sector joined us, that was quite an eye opener as well, to see what they had to offer and what they could offer in the future, and the way in which we could structure our contracts and procurement. But I think overall, and I'm sure you all agree, that it has been a very, very eye-opening discussions with the various sectors and the the senior officers that have come along and the members that have come along, the cabinet members that have come along, to have this discussion, to try and understand this particular process, which I have to say is a great deal more complicated than what many people thought when they first came onto this scrutiny working panel, because I know one individual, I won't mention any names, said to me, "You've opened a can of worms there, which is going to be there for a long, long time." Well, so be it, but that's our role in scrutiny, is to examine and to open those cans. So my at this stage, if I could thank everyone that's taken part, not just the members, but everyone included, I thank you all for that, your inputs, and actually your insight into what, as I say, is a very, very complex issue. So if we then go on to one of the things it does say, we were happy about the limitations of what we could do and the timescales involved, because as many of you have said, we'd like to have done more into specific areas, social services for a start of, and more understanding of what care home fees would be, and how we procure our care packages for external and domiciliary care. But again, it's a matter of time, and we have to agree the limitations that we had. If you then go on to equalities, I think we've done a really good job of being fair across the whole board, across the whole of the council, in having an equality agenda which included everybody and excluded nothing. The evidence collected, as I just said, I thanked everybody for that, and it says there who we have. I don't think there's anybody there that we've missed. If there is, if you could please let us know, but I'm pretty sure that we've done that. We've included everybody. And then the conclusions, as Chris Williams has just said about procurement should be built into council's recovery and transformation plan. Well, we've all agreed that should be the case. And 2.11 about the panel is satisfied that procurement is clearly built into the council's recovery plan. I think we all agree with that. I don't think there's anyone that, I can't see anybody put their hand up that would have any no, right, okay. And each department, but we've actually discussed the fact that education is probably a bit more difficult because we have over 100 schools, and as Chris Williams has just said, we have 100 different purchasing areas because those schools are purchasing powers. And I've gone through the rest of those conclusions. I'm not sure if there's anybody who wants to look at those conclusions. I'll go through them. 2.13, 1.4, 1.5, 1.6. I think in 1.6 the audit. I think we need that. I will be having discussions with the audit chair with regards to other things about performance data and what have you. But I think this procurement data as well might be one of those discussions that takes place with the chair of audit at some time in the future, because audit is going to have quite an onerous task if we are going to ask audit to look at the procurement and how it's done ethically and with our reduction in carbon, etc., built into it. So I think that discussion needs to take place about how we do that. Right, so go on to 2.17, 2.18, and then we come on to 2.2. I think it's quite clear that the heading of this section about adherence to legislation and ensuring local policy and practice is clear, effective, transparent, and consistently applied is vital. I think this is part of the open days. This is where we explain to anyone who wants to come along to this what our procurement is about. It's got to be open. It's got to be transparent. and we've got to tell, and people have got to see how it's being done, and you know, so I think all of that, all of this section of 2.2 is very, very important, that it's part and parcel of those open days. So I think that, I don't think there's anything on 2.2 unless anybody has any issues. Right, then we move on to 2.3, which is quality as well as value for money is necessary to get the best spend for the public purse. Well, I think we all agree that is the case, and especially when we look at for schools where we have to have the right type of glass indoors, we have to have the right type of equipment, we have to have the right health and safety issues, because heaven forbid if we did something or a school did something and it wasn't up to a certain standard and a child got hurt in any way, then the council can say these are the standards you have to abide by because health and safety, etc. And I think it's vitally important that we reckon that people understand that, because there is nothing worse than having an injury which could have been prevented if people had followed the right procedures. So I think that's incredibly important, that statement that quality as well as value for money is necessary to get the best spend for the public purse. I think that's very, very important, and I think that we should, you know, make sure that all schools understand that. I don't think there's anything in the body of 2.3 that we would need to alter, unless anyone has any comments. No? Okay. The one thing I think that we have to understand here is where if you go to 235 and the council have moved away from the use of framework which was put in place by the Welsh Government, has now down a different route. The benefits of using the framework is supposed to reduce the overall procurement cost. This was, I have to say, quite interesting, because we use the framework when we do contracts or roads and pavements and what have you. We've had that framework for many years, and you know, we all know the firms that are on that, and I know some of them have now gone bust or into bankruptcy or what have you. But what I was quite taken aback by when that the framework for IT was removed, and they now use a different procedure. Didn't quite understand what that procedure was, because the gentleman was very good at IT, but I don't think he was particularly good at explaining how what the new framework was. But it was interesting that they wanted to build up this long-term connection between suppliers and the buyers, and I think that's something that for another time that maybe we need to understand, because as been rightly pointed out, IT is now such a part of our lives in every shape and form. So I think, you know, that particular statement and the way in which that is going to be done, I think that's something else that needs to be looked at in the future, and I think that's one of the things that we would have to put into our report. Has anybody comments on that?
Do you want me to give a little bit of background, Councillor Holly?
Yes, yeah, by all means, Chris.
I mean, with frameworks, what you are typically doing is you're working with a group of, say, 5 companies. You've quality assessed them, they've passed all sorts of checks and balances, and then you said, okay, these 5 companies have a certain specialism. We'd like to periodically go to them for, and then get them to bid against each other, what's called a mini competition between the selected group of companies. In the case of the conversation you're referring to in that paragraph 2.35, what we were talking about there was the purchase of laptops. Mm-hmm. Now, these are very much what we might call commodity products, in a sense that, you know, they're fairly easy to access. You've got many sellers. What we were finding was that there were certain difficulties through the current arrangement, that companies were saying they could deliver something and then they couldn't. That was part of our rationale for perhaps changing the way we were doing things. And there was a feel that we could easily, because these are, as I said, what we could consider commodity items, go to what we call an open market tender, which is one of the routes to market. So we simply advertise it to anybody, any company that's there. They'd still have to clearly check a few boxes, perhaps say a 3-year warranty on the laptop or whatever, industry standard stuff. And you can invite a wider group of suppliers. And by doing that, we got cost savings, basically. So that was our rationale for pursuing that. So better response, better price value ratio. Let's just give you a background about some of sort of my side's perspective to that point that's raised under that 2.3.5.
I have to say, Chris, you came along. Your explanation was 100% better than the explanation we had from the gentleman from the IT department, because I don't think he helped himself. I think he's never going to be a salesman. But I thank you for that. But I think that was quite an interesting discussion that was anyway. But thank you for the clarification on it. Right, if we then move on to 2.4, we need to consider how leaving the European Union will affect procurement in Swansea. To be perfectly honest with you, this one, there's nothing we can add to this, I don't think, or take away from it, because I'm not really sure anybody can tell you what's going to happen in the immediate future or in the long-term future, because I don't think any of us know yet. And I think that's a fair assumption, unless anybody's got anything else to add. Because even the Minister for Benefits doesn't have a clue, I don't think. So, I really don't understand, I don't think we know yet what will be, if it is benefits, if it isn't benefits. So I think that's quite an open question, and we leave it there. Okay. Right, 2.5 is there is a positive local procurement practice which can be built upon and embedded further. I think this is very important, as we spoke earlier about the open days, and the Councillor David Hawkins, the Deputy Leader, has said that this is part and parcel of those open days. It's incredibly important that we try and spend the Swansea pound as possible, as close to Swansea as we can, to benefit the people of Swansea and the businesses in Swansea. So I think, unless anybody's got anything to add to 2.5, I think as it is, it says it all, really.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and I think that what's under 2.53, what we were told by Amanda Carr about the projects that we spoke about earlier on, I think that's again vitally important that we remember that. Right. What's the next item then? Right. The one thing that we did talk about, and I know Councillor Mary Sherwood was very keen on it, and that was in 2.58, where we done some desktop research. Well, I should say we did it. We didn't. Michelle Roberts did it, who's done an excellent job on that. And that's the Preston Procurement Model, Cardiff Council Social Responsibility, Huldar, Community Wealth in Leeds, and Harrow Making Refurbishment Better. I think what all of those taught us was that you can frame contracts in a way that can help local people, but it's the actual framing of procurement. It's people understanding what the procurement process is about as well. And I think the one I quite liked was the Harrow Making Refurbishment Better. That included a lot more discussion with people before the refurbishment was done, to understand what people want in that refurbishment. And it's not just about houses and community centres and office blocks or anything. It was right across the board, and that was a well worth read. I think the Preston procurement model was a little bit more based, what I don't know what Chris has to say about this, Chris Williams has to say about this, but it did seem to me to be a little bit more complicated that it necessarily be. And I think Beyond Bricks and Mortar is as good as much of what the Preston one was saying. But Chris, what do you think?
Yeah, no, I agree. I think we are very focused on these type of outcomes. As I said, the Community Benefits Initiative on its own predates a lot of this work by many years. I think it tries to bring in the folds. Well, the first thing to say is when they started looking at it, they had a very low level of interaction with local businesses, local companies. I think their metric was maybe 2 or 3% of the total spend they were looking at. We're way higher than that, you know. And so I think they were in a particularly bad situation, and they talked about their journey of considering these things a bit like we've been discussing, you know, of making contracts smaller where we can, of building in community benefits, of building in environmental solutions. We haven't badged it as a model as such, but we've certainly been, I think, you know, one of the furthest ahead in the game of this type of consideration. And I've always said, you know, that we're never perfect and we want to improve and we want to continue. And I think that's where the report drives us. But I don't think, as you're saying, from that particular model, we learned something that we didn't know already. I think the challenge for us is to improve, always consistently improve on what we do now. You know, where can we go next? What's the next project? Getting into the detail, the technical detail of what's being bought. But like as you were saying, Councillor Holly, it's considering before you go to market, what do you want? You know, what is that mix of things that we're trying to get the right mix? That's where we're driving our time and attention. I was working with one of the teams on the PRU, the People Referral Unit construction projects, going back a while. But the number of layers that were put into that contract, whether it's community benefits or solar panels or working with local companies through subcontract, you know, there were many elements in it. And I think that speaks to the complexity of this, but also the attention to detail. So there's that understanding before you go to market, understanding in a design of the contract. That is the next level of this. You know, that's where you got to focus on a per project basis almost. Focus that level of detail and analysis. It's not easy work, but I think your report does just steer us in that direction, and it is the right way forward. You know, I think we've got a good group of people who are very committed and focused on this in the council. So yeah, that support effectively and that scrutiny of what we do is vital to considering we're pushing forward on the right track.
Okay, thank you, Chris. So I think that the whole of 2.5 does speak for itself. I think there are issues that we may need to discuss in the future, but I think that is for the future anyway. 2.6 is, I think that's speak for itself, really, isn't it? You know, we want everybody to have that equality ethic built in within any of their work and working practices. I don't know if any comments on 2.6? No. 2.7 again, you know, it goes without saying we need to ensure that we have good environmental and ethical practices. I think it's incredibly important when we're going forward about how future contracts are looked at. Any comments or questions on that? No? Okay. Where are we now? 2.7. Again, on 2.778, we consider the council's approach to social value, localism, but we've said that before, so it's not, we are repeating what we said earlier on. 2.8, there are benefits in collaboration with partners, others in procurement activities. I think we all agreed here that, you know, when you go out to other partners, if we procure something with Eastern Port Talbot Council or Carmarthen Council or the Health Board or whatever, the size does matter, yes, as long as it doesn't compromise quality and what have you. But I think, you know, we are right in saying that working across the partners, working across departments, right across the board, even if it's the fire service or even the police, would be a lot more difficult with the police, I know. But procurement with all these organisations does help. Chris, I don't know if you want to say anything on that.
No, I absolutely agree. Putting a lot of effort in behind the scenes to facilitating that. Most recently, we did asbestos contract for the removal of asbestos, which we collaborated with about another 10 local authorities on, as Swansea is the lead. So it means that only one set of staff have to be tied up, if you want to call it that, in terms of resource, in terms of technical analysis. So we're sharing expertise on that way across local authorities. There are many other versions of this. I think in terms of the national context, there was a national procurement service that was set up probably more than a decade ago now, which tried to do all Wales contracts. Certain of those still do exist, for where you've got these sort of commodity type purchases, but the flavour now is more a regional approach, partly because of the involvement of local contractors, but partly because of customer service. So what it was being found was where you had an all Wales contract, perhaps a certain supplier who might have been based in, I don't know, Cardiff would struggle to serve Anglesey, or vice versa. So I think there's a general tendency to look at regional based thing. We've obviously got South West Wales region, but also working with Powys or Bridgend, other close, geographically close authorities. Yeah, so in summary, there's a huge amount of work that goes into regional collaboration. We sit on a Welsh local government group at the national level. We sit on a Welsh local government group at the regional level. So we're constantly exploring how best to collaborate. And that's in the procurement area. And then you would have the same for each of the service areas. So, the colleagues in building services will collaborate with Carmarthenshire, colleagues in highways will collaborate with Neath Patrol. But so there's a huge amount of work that goes on behind the scenes to look for the best fit for the authority in terms of its way forward. No, unfortunately, because it's complicated, but there's often no one size fits all solution to this. It could be a national IT system, or it could be, we say, something like some building works, electrical works are best done in Swansea. So we're constantly looking when contracts come up for renewal, what is the best way forward? What serves us and those wider issues, those social value issues you were mentioning, what serves the council, the authority in the best way? So that's, constant review process that goes on, and everybody seeking to do the best they can.
Okay, thank you, Chris. I think any members on sitting? No. If we move then on to 2.9, again, this was on effective procurement needs a good framework for monitoring performance, measuring success, essential continuous improvement. I don't think anybody can disagree with that, because I think that, but it's the element of that monitoring which at some stage, Michelle, that discussion will have to take place, who does that monitoring. But I think it does say everything there that we've agreed. And then we come on to the recommendations, and obviously we've gone through them. We've seen the long-term challenges. We agree with a lot of them. The medium-term improvements, obviously we've moved one of those, and that's the open days to a quick win, sorry. And then obviously then there's the quick wins we add into that now, open days and the involvement in far more widespread activity with our local businesses and local individuals. And then I think we've put down further scrutiny needed. I think it is important that we actually say this, that this is a living document, because procurement never stops, it goes on. Things change, performance changes, the materials that we use change, and on top of that, the way in which companies operate as well changes. So we have to be a bit more fleet of foot when we are doing our procurement to make sure that we are in alignment with that. Now, what I've said is it should fit into the scrutiny work programme overall. There should be scope to discuss the subject and that's, you know, for the Scrutiny Programme Committee in the future to look at and how that's done. And I think if everybody's happy with that statement and the further scrutiny needed.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, excuse me. Right, if that is the case, well, to apologise, Michelle.
Yeah, I just to let you know that we contacted all the people who contributed to the inquiry, both internally and externally. We had a few responses, but they were just to say they're happy with the report. So just to let you know, they've all been contacted and we've had those responses. So the only few changes that were made from the last copy that you had were just sort of typos and bits and pieces, really. So that's that really. I just if you're happy with the report, obviously with the amendments we discussed, what I'll do is I'll send it for the usual clearance with Legal and Finance, and then it will be agended for the Scrutiny Programme Committee on the 15th of March, which Councillor Holly, you attend anyway, don't you?
Yeah.
Scrutiny so you'll present that to the meeting as well. So, but it'll be agended obviously in a week in advance for that. So if everyone's happy with that.
Are everybody happy? Any comments or questions? No? That again, we've put in the acknowledged thanks to everybody that's down. That I think we've not missed anybody, but I would like to thank everybody for their contributions. And believe you me, it has been a very interesting journey on this procurement, and I can see that it probably will extend well beyond this particular inquiry panel. And I wish to thank particularly Michelle, because you've done a great deal of research, and it's that you've produced an excellent report, one which is comprehensive but at the same time brief to the point. So thank you very much indeed. And again, to all of you, thank you very much. And as Michelle said, she'll send out the report amended with those couple of changes, the quick wins, etc. And I look forward to talking to you all again at some time in the future. Okay. Thank you all again for attending. Michelle, can you stay on the line for a minute?
Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.